If you're new here, this channel is about blending science, practical training methods, and lifestyle, so you can perform at your best without wasting time on things that don't work. I'm Craig Doran, a performance coach with over a decade of experience and a master's in exercise science. I've trained everyone from everyday people to collegiate and professional athletes and military personnel. Here's the thing though, I actually live the things I teach. From ultramarathon to unconventional training methods, you can see what works and what doesn't. All right, so let's talk about aesthetics versus performance. If you're on social media and you're into fitness and any type of capacity, what's going to be put in front of you is most likely a lot of unrealistic scenarios or expectations. Talking to the people like myself, like my old younger self, who would look at these people, say, okay, here's how they're training, this is what they're eating, this is what they're doing. I'm gonna do that in the hopes of looking like them. Unfortunately, looking that way and performing the way they perform is very hard to do. You're not going to be able to look like your favorite influencer or hybrid athlete or CrossFit athlete and perform like they do. And training the way they're training to get you there won't actually make you look like they do. A lot of these athletes spend decades building muscle mass with traditional lifting means, hypertrophy, strength. A lot of them were prior college athletes, bodybuilders, stuff like that. So they built a tremendous amount of muscle mass, and now they do a lot of endurance work and they stripped away the fat, and now what's left over is a super aesthetic physique. Okay, so if you don't have the muscle mass, the requisite muscle mass, I always like to say you can't chisel a pebble, all right? You can only chisel a rock. So you need the muscle mass before you achieve the leanness. So a lot of times I see, which was myself, which I think if I could look back on it, I probably lost maybe 10 years of doing this perpetual under fueling and trying to gain muscle mass and try to be lean at the same time. So I think this is going to be truly an epidemic in our time, especially for younger males, of wanting abs and wanting to stay lean and never gaining the requisite muscle mass that they need to get the look that they actually want. So if I could go back, tell my younger self, don't worry about the abs, build strength, build muscle mass, do all the right things for that. And then in your 30s or your late 20s and you finally want to do a cut and expose all that, then that's great. That's what you should have done. But now I'm going back through cycles to try to catch up. And at 34, it's not the easiest thing to do. So that would be my advice. Being super shredded, being super lean, it might look, you might think, oh, that person's like super high performing right now. Like that's the epitome of health. That's the epitome of fitness. That's why they're good at what they do. And it's actually not a great thing to be insanely lean for most things. I know there's been research done on when I worked in the military with Ranger School students, and they found that the ideal body fat percentage for them for performance and success rates were about 15% for men. 15%, you're not overweight, you're not you're not holding too much fat, but 15% is definitely fatter than your favorite influencer or your favorite hybrid athlete. That's for sure. A super long event, you're gonna want actually a little bit more body fat, just for reserves, for like a multi-hour, multi-day event. Obviously, we have a ton of fuel during those races, so it's not completely necessary, but it's part of this entire system of durability going into the race. With healthy body fat usually comes healthy hormones. It means we have enough adequate calories on board, adequate nutrients. We're getting good sleep because our cortisol's in check. Our stress is low. We're maintaining our muscle mass, so we're not losing a ton of muscle mass, maintaining our bone density. So you can see how these things are pretty global. So I'm not saying more fat is the greatest performance advantage thing in the world, but usually it indicates a lot of other things. So when you're super lean, to maintain that leanness and to get to that leanness, you're going to be in a calorie deficit or energy deficit. with that, and especially at a prolonged chronic time, that's going to bring about that drops in hormones, elevation in cortisol, can mess with your sleep patterns, can increase your stress, downregulate thyroid, loss of muscle mass, loss of bone density. So there's some people that are just genetically gifted and they can maintain lower body fat levels and perform without the sacrifice in most of those things I just mentioned, but that's very rare. Usually for most people, when they start dipping, for men, I'm going to probably be speaking mostly for men body fat percentages for this video, but if you're dropping below 10 to 12%, you're probably dipping into that range where performance is going to start to suffer a little bit. So it's not necessarily a good or bad thing to have a little bit more body fat on board, but it usually paints a better picture of kind of where an athlete's at metabolically, hormonally, and physically for that event. So you might be wondering why then, if you're training super high mileage, and especially for an endurance race, how would you be putting on body fat, or how would you not be losing body fat? And for some people, it might be really easy and their volume might be so high that they don't feel like they're gaining any body fat, and they might be losing body fat. This isn't a one size fits all approach here, but most of the time, if you're fueling for endurance training and keeping up with your energy intake and your energy demands, it's really hard to match your output with all those different variables, all your different training sessions in the week, different distances, different paces, different trails versus pavement, so difference in surface areas, elevation versus no elevation. So more or less, you know, it's almost impossible to know your true energy expenditure. We can look at our Garmin and try to get a indication of what's normal and what's not normal, but that's not going to be very accurate at the end of the day. So basically, it's super hard to consume an energy intake to try to match your energy expenditure and try to be at a maintenance or a little slightly above, which would minimize fat gain and promote kind of all the good things. So it's really hard to nail that perfectly. So that's why when people end up fueling for these types of trainings and events, they end up overshooting a little bit. So if you're eating, say, 3,500 calories a day, and you're only truly expending 3,200, well, that's 300 calorie surplus every day that you might not even be aware of. That could just literally be in your gels and sports drinks. And over the course of a 16-week training block, 20-week training block, you could add a fair amount of body fat to go along with that training. So that's kind of where or how you could end up gaining a little bit of weight when you're training for endurance events. So just to recap this first section, aesthetics versus performance, super hard to be aesthetic, ripped up, have abs, and perform at your best. So meet your paces, meet your distances, match your running volume or your weekly volumes. Avoid injury, avoid overuse injuries, because those are going to pop up a little bit more if you're under fueling, versus just eating enough calories and supporting your training and not worrying about the way you look. So that's going to be true performance with the added benefits of a little bit higher body fat percentage. For most people, genetically is going to be advantageous. Kind of closing thoughts on aesthetics versus performance. Don't worry about what other people look like or what they're doing. Set your goal and execute a plan to work towards that goal. So whatever that is, you might have to sacrifice some things to get there. And if you don't want to sacrifice some things to get there, then that's okay too. That's kind of what I did for my ultra marathon. I knew I was taking a risk with my training to not lose too much muscle mass. So I understood that my performance was taking a hit because of my other goals I had. So it's also okay to prioritize your goals and have multiple goals at the same time.